Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program Kyle Wilberts, who's a business consultant at Command Alkon. And today we're going to talk about digital transformation in the heavy building materials industry. Now, virtually all industries today are undergoing digital, transformation. And, the opportunity for cost savings and productivity and customer service improvements are arguably greatest in the heavy building materials industry when you consider all of the manual processing and paper-based processing that's taking place in this industry today. So how is digital transformation, starting to transform, the industry today? And, what are some of the opportunities and value propositions for contractors, haulers, and suppliers in this industry? Well, those are just some of the questions we're going to discuss in today's episode. And it's great to have Kyle on the program, who's been on the front lines of this for quite some time, to share his insights and advice on this topic. So, Kyle, welcome to the program.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adrian, for having me here. And then I'm excited to talk about the topics.
Great. Well, Kyle, you're a first-time guest here on Talking Logistics. And like I always do, whenever we bring someone new onto the program, I'm always curious how they got involved with this industry to begin with. So before we kind of dive into the meat of the topic here, why don't we start there? Just tell us a little bit briefly about your career path and, how and why you got involved with this industry and what your current role and responsibilities are there at Command Alkon.
Perfect. Absolutely. So my history, I worked primarily with a general contractor for the majority of my professional career. I worked for Kiewit Construction since 2005. I hired on with them straight out of school, went to school for engineering, and got involved in some construction. So hired on with Kiewit, and it was a great time. I spent 10 plus years there. How Kiewit operates, they're really all about training their employees, which is great. So they bring you in at a ground level and put you in the middle of it. So I held every role, within the project management flow. So I started out field engineer, spent a lot of time out in the field, graduated and started getting involved in more of a superintendent's role. I had an opportunity to be a subcontract manager, worked with a lot of subcontractors, spent some time as a trucking manager. Took part on a project that had a lot of trucks, and I worked with another gentleman who was the truck boss on site, and worked with him to manage the logistical effort on site, and continued that evolution and into a project management role. That's really Kiewit's goal, is to train their employees to someday manage work and manage work successfully. So did that, and then ultimately about 5 months ago, I took a role with Command Alkon to get more involved with project controls specifically. It was a job called the Northgate, or the DFW Connector, which was a Northgate Constructors joint venture with Kiewit and Zachary. And it was on that job that at the time, this was 2008, it was $1 billion job here in Dallas-Fort Worth, and that's really where I got heavily involved in project controls and truly started to understand the impacts that they could make on a job success. So, I've been with Command Alkon for about 5 months now, but my time spent with Command Alkon and working towards this project controls initiative has been, 8+ years. So that's kind of my background.
Great. Well, it sounds like, for people that are familiar with the industry, Kiewit is a pretty big name, in the industry. And so it sounds like, right out of college, you've been in the front lines of and experiencing firsthand, the whole, the processes that take place in this industry, both the good as well as perhaps the not so good, or the areas that need a lot of improvement. So I guess that's where I want to go ahead now with my first question here. I mean, obviously you've been on the front lines of this now, for over 10 years, and obviously even though you've been formally on the Command Alkon for just 5 months, you've been working with them on for a number of years as well from a technology standpoint. I mean, when you look at the industry and your experience, I mean, what are some of the main challenges, that are faced by contractors as well as haulers and suppliers in this industry? I mean, what is the, where the opportunities are, if you will?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you included all three, because a lot of the challenges out there are very similar for contractors, haulers, and suppliers within the industry. At Command Alkon, we kind of call that the heavy building materials ecosystem. all three entities being a part of that, as well as some others, including owners and things like that. But a lot of these challenges are quite the same. And starting, kind of at a high level, even project challenges are growing. The work is getting much, much bigger. When I entered into this industry, which was not that long ago, 10 plus years, it wasn't near as common to find these $1 billion plus projects. So not that the challenge is only specific to larger jobs, but the bigger the work gets, the more money starts to flow between hands. And this is happening on a daily basis. Another challenge with projects of today is faster schedules. The expectation of a completion time is growing. And it used to be where a job, 10 years ago would take 10 years to complete. Nowadays, it's taking 3 years to complete. So the challenges of just keeping up with the demand is significant. And then, from a project standpoint, jobs are getting a lot more complex. You look at what we were building 10 years ago to today, and it's night and day. And along with that complexity comes the specifications and the requirements by the owner to ensure that that the contractor and the entities involved in building the work are producing quality work that meets the expectation and the specifications that's written. So those are, project challenges. Diving into specific challenges, time is a significant one. And that sounds kind of like a no-brainer, but just having enough time to complete these challenges is, due to what we just discussed, becoming much, much more difficult. As an example of that, proof of delivery, something that we do every day, even in our personal lives. UPS, FedEx, whoever's delivering our packages shows up, and they, 10 years ago, they would be requiring a signature for, proving that they delivered that package. It doesn't happen today. So being able to, in the field, in the construction industry, we're still there. We're still signing things. It's still necessary for people to be at the spot and verify these things, and it's all captured in a very paper format, at the end of the day. So if we can make things more efficient through, it's going to offer more time to take into account the things that are taking place in real time out in the field. Documentation is another one. In the construction industry, we are constantly documenting everything. And that is a effort that is taking place within each entity. The contractors, the haulers, the suppliers, all of them are documenting things. So that's very time consuming because, once again, we're dealing with millions, sometimes billions of dollars worth of information. So quality control is another challenge. There's materials out there. The materials are getting more and more advanced. And because of that, owners need to see the information that proves that they are building things to the required specifications. So understanding the quality control and the efforts that go into capturing things done correctly is a challenge. Driver seat time from a hauling perspective, significant challenge. Not only from a standpoint, I think everybody in the industry has heard that drivers are becoming more and more difficult to come to get on your job or to haul the materials that you're trying to sell. But in addition to that, like I said, these jobs are getting more complex, which allow for scheduling changes, and it's much more difficult to keep truckers busy in some cases consistently on a job. So that's a challenge that we can impact through on-site dispatching and truly understanding what these drivers are doing on the job while they're there. Instead of calling for another truck, maybe we can just share some of the time or just move a truck from operation to operation on a job rather than request a brand new one. And then finally, accounts payable. That's a huge challenge, as well as accounts receivable. Any kind of accounting when it comes to materials. Currently in today's world, we are, like I said, paper-based. So everybody is trying to capture this data, and it's a very manual process. And you can't reconcile an invoice without having the data to compare against. And you can only do that through documentation. And that's where accounts payable and receivable kind of, they sit. And we need to be able to provide them the information they need to do their jobs. And that's a very manual process in today's world.
Yeah, no, it sounds, I mean, as you went through all those different challenges, I mean, it's very interesting to me, when a lot of people think about supply chains, they may think more around, retail supply chains or, manufacturing supply chains. But when you think about the heavy building materials, ecosystem or supply chain, if you want to use that term, a lot of the same challenges, right? I mean, you're talking about, time constraints. You're talking about customer requirements becoming more demanding, right? You talked about, things that used to, the expectation maybe was, it would take 10 years in the past. Now the expectation is that that type of project has to be completed in 3 years. Talk about, labor shortage or, the trucking issues on the hauler side of things, similar types of dynamics going on in other industries as well. And then the need for that, timely, accurate, and complete data and information to do something as that you would think would be as streamlined as accounts payable and receivables, right? But still getting bogged down with paperwork, in that kind of environment. So it's kind of interesting to kind of see the parallels and how at the end of the day, a lot of the challenges and issues that other industries have faced and continue to face are also present in this industry as well. Talking about kind of the paper side of things. I mean, I was at your user conference, last fall, and there was a lot of discussion around tickets. Now, for people who are might not be familiar with the industry, I mean, what are tickets? Why are they important? And what's the main challenge with processing tickets? And from a contractor's perspective, I mean, what are all the types of tickets that are involved in the daily processes that they are involved with? Yeah,
that's a great question. We tickets. There's a number of ways. Basically, tickets are a receipt of cargo or a bill of lading, and they contain all the information that one would need to complete all the processes that we talked about before. So ultimately, whether it's a load of rock, a load of asphalt or concrete, when that truck is being loaded at the from the dispatch center, the quarry, the batch plant, wherever that may be, before that truck gets sent to the job site, they are handing that driver a form of documentation of what that truck is hauling. And, generally that's referred to as a ticket. So the information on that is, first off, where, departure and destination information, dates, itemized list of goods. Generally that's one good in today's discussion, purely from, if you're buying a load of rock, you're buying that one load of rock. So, but an itemized list of what you're actually receiving, the weight or the volume or the amount that you're purchasing or that was delivered in that load. And then something as basic as, who's involved, who's selling the product, who's buying the product, who's hauling the product. All that information is collected on that one paper copy ticket today. And that's what, that's what's produced and really everything's based off of from that point. So that in and of itself can add to, why is this information important, or why is this paper copy ticket important? At the end of the day, the information that's housed on that ticket is specific to that one load. The bigger goal is what's taking place throughout that day. So the collective information that is that the ticket represents it truly turns into a baseline almost of what both parties involved in the transaction can base their books off of. So at the end of the day, it's not you're getting a ticket for one load, but if you order 10 loads, collectively that is the baseline for what you purchased and what you ultimately have to pay for.
So it sounds like there's a lot of there's fragmentation there, right? Because you now have, if you have 10 loads, now you have 10 different tickets. And I remember at the conference, someone mentioned, when they started in the industry, which is still happening today in many cases, at the end of the day, there would be a stack of tickets, on a table that then someone had to go in and then enter manually into some system to get that visibility or get that understanding in terms of what happened today on the job site, what was accomplished, what still needs to be done to update the project schedule, so on and so forth. So a lot of manual processing and latency and having that visibility, because you had to wait till that information got entered into the system, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's part of the challenge is, you talk about everything going on in the day, and the majority of the people working on this effort have other responsibilities. They're out in the field, they're managing work, they're working with people and equipment and really trying to get things done in the field, because ultimately it's about schedule, and producing the job that you're requested to produce. The money is something that, you have to manage on a daily basis. And in order to do that, you're not going to be looking at one ticket. At the end of the day, you're going to be looking at all the tickets that showed up on job. And that's how you get a true view of what your cost is. And really the only way that you can accurately say whether you did meet your budget or you came in under budget or above budget. And that's when we talk about why it's important. There's a couple different areas. There's the accounts receivable, the accounts payable. They're focused on those big numbers, specifically when an invoice shows up, or when they're receiving the information, but also just daily efforts, daily costs. Daily cost is incredibly important to project success, because if you're not making money today, there's a good chance if you don't recognize that, you're not going to make money tomorrow. And understanding all the cost, it's not just labor, it's not just equipment. It's labor, equipment, small tools and supplies, your materials that you're bringing on site, your permanent materials, all your safety stuff, all of that gets bottled into true cost and understanding that. So that goes, once again, hand in hand with your comment. If you can't consolidate all of the information that you're receiving on a daily basis, then it's very difficult to see true daily costs. And ultimately, waste and yields are the easiest way to lose money. Nobody wants to pay for anything that they're not receiving, and that's happening on a daily basis in the industry, simply because people can't collect the information quick enough to make a real-time decision. So those are a pretty good outline of some of the challenges.
Yeah, no, I mean, it boils down to, visibility, really. I mean, I think that's something that across all supply chains, you hear people are that's their main goal, is to have visibility to what's happening with operations, visibility to what's happening on the financial side of things. And obviously, if you've got a lot of, manual processing, a lot of fragmented, collection of information and data, that's going to, delay the ability to have timely visibility of what's happening, and then it's going to create some friction in the system to be able to stay on top of the schedules and all of that. So I think I think we've talked through kind of what the challenges are historically in this industry, but like I mentioned in the onset, we are starting to see digital transformation in this industry, or this industry beginning to realize the benefits of, digitizing some of these processes and really look at it from an ecosystem, standpoint. I know that's one of the areas that, Command Alkon is starting to, work on with all the different stakeholders in the heavy building materials industry. Can you, talk a little bit about how digitization is starting to transform, this industry now?
Absolutely. And we've kind of touched on some of these, but I mean, the easiest way to look at the industry and how it's using the tools of today, you look at our personal lives, mobile apps, websites, social networks, everything we do in our personal lives, is through, probably one of those three. You look at the construction industry and honestly, we're basically one step ahead of using fax machines. The email was developed and, hey, we have this document and we no longer have to scan it. We can just shoot it over in a PDF format. And that's where we sit. And the rest of the world is continuing on and, completing transactions. Even your electrical company, you get the paper bill in the mail and the first thing you do is you log onto the website and you see the button, I want to go paperless. And they're, in fact, incentivizing you for it. So that's where the industry is starting to move towards, is starting to utilize the tools of today. How that can affect the industry, you look from a mobile app perspective and just, we touched on proof of delivery earlier. In today's world, that truck is showing up with, a paper copy ticket, which in many cases is duplicated because it needs to go to multiple parties, whether that's the owner, the contractor, everybody needs to get paid. Everybody needs to understand and have the documentation to prove that. And, So the truck shows up and he hands a paper copy ticket, and hopefully somebody's there to sign it. Maybe sometimes they're not. We have a lot of data that and we've talked to a lot of companies out there that, looking at how many companies are actually signing 100% of the tickets that show up on site. In many cases, this is viewed as being more efficient, but at the end of the day, it's just passing the buck along and creating a bigger problem down the line, which ultimately wastes more time. How we can improve that is, have somebody out in the field with one of these, and the truck shows up, and instead of the driver handing them a paper copy ticket, maybe that, a text message or an alert is provided that individual or that job site, and you can go on here and look at your screen, and it will show that truckload. Hey, this is the truck that's showing up on site, and that individual can either accept or reject and have GPS location next to it. And all of that, goes into proof of delivery. And everyone understands that load was dumped or delivered at that site, and we're moving on with our day. And there's no more paper. The website or the network platform, all that information collected in one spot and having access to it, and being able to update it is incredibly important, but makes things incredibly efficient. If you have two records and I update one of them and you're looking at the other one, there's going to be a lack of communication there. So having a platform where not only are you capturing information, but you're able to update it, this makes efficiency, just fly off the shelves. Because now, as a seller or a producer, if I understand that you've accepted a load for payment, I no longer have to wait until the week's end, the month's end, to bill you on something that you may or may not be willing to pay for. I don't know. Now I can look directly at it and say, hey, they're willing to pay for this material. Basically what you're doing is you're going from managing all the data to managing the exceptions. The products that are not accepted for payment, those are the ones you should focus on, because those are the ones that are the time consuming and the errors that are being made that we need to recognize and deal with in real time. And that's the true efficiency, is not waiting till or passing the buck on, but dealing with things in real time and moving forward. So those are some of the opportunities. I mean, we could talk for the next 8 hours on some of the ways that this stuff could be effective. But at the end of the day, it's not about eliminating or passing the buck on, but dealing with these things in efficient and daily effort is really the bang for your buck.
Right. So it sounds like, I know recently you guys announced, a solution or a platform called, Build It. And as I understand it, it's, really creating an ecosystem here and a platform for, all the different stakeholders that, to be able to connect with one another and be able to process, have that single source of truth, if you will, and single point of visibility to some of these processes, including kind of the ticketing process that we talked about before, to help, automate and expedite, that process. Is that kind of gets to the gist of what, Build It is about? I mean, what are some of the key things that are as part of that platform?
Absolutely. I mean, Build It is all about the cycle. Three main points. There's a bunch of little things that happen in between all these, but basically somebody's ordering some material, somebody's delivering material, and somebody's paying for material or trucking or whatever that is. You're buying good, you're ordering goods, receiving goods, and then you're paying for those goods. Build It is a tool that is able to collect and allow for multiple parties to operate off the same data in its simplest form. So when the information is created at the batch house, wherever you're buying concrete from, that information is loaded into this platform called Build It. And now, there's a bunch of rules and there's all kinds of privacy to it. But it allows for the buyer to see that information in real time and apply accounting information or place of use or, the discipline or the individual that was responsible for placing them. All kinds of field specific information. It allows for real-time updates and all parties can use that information. So once that information is loaded into Build It, that's not it for the supplier. They can then refer back to that network and see, are there materials being delivered? Are they being delivered in the right spot? Are they approved for payment? Are they not? Things like that down the line in the process, things become much more efficient. But yeah, Build It is that place where we're placing this information and sharing that information with everyone involved.
Yes, it sounds like, ultimately, when we talk about digitization, we talked about all the paperwork and, manual processing taking place. I mean, this sounds like this is kind of one of those platforms, that defines digitization in this industry, where it's now about bringing the different stakeholders as part of this ecosystem, have that centralized, data and visibility. And then on top of that, you can then start executing some of these processes that we talked about. So we're ultimately, I mean, what's the value proposition of Build It for contractors and subcontractors? I mean, what benefits can they achieve by adopting this type of digital platform?
Yeah, well, you almost just hit on one of them, and that's standardization. And that kind of goes across the board, not only contractors and subcontractors, but the ability to standardize a process in many cases is more difficult than you'd imagine. Prior to Build It, the go-to is typically an Excel spreadsheet. And if anybody listening out there understands Excel, you can do things 1,000 different ways and end up with the same answer. So, as these jobs get bigger, or even the small jobs, if you have two people doing things two different ways, the results can sometimes be very, very different. So the value for all parties, having a tool that you're able to standardize, just going back a step, you were talking about ordering and sharing that data on that platform. Just having a tool that allows you to create order forms, review those order forms with your suppliers or your haulers, and use that form as a standardized form. So from that point forward, everybody's working off of the same understanding. It's just a simple example of how to standardize the process. This helps with turnover, with new employees, with moving people around. But some of the other, some of the other, offerings or benefits that a contractor would see would just be, we talked about it earlier, the project cost, the near real time updates of information. So maybe, at 3:00 in the afternoon, as a superintendent or a foreman, I'm trying to place 3,000 tons of aggregate. I look and Build It, and I see that I have only been delivered 1,700. Well, I only got 3 hours left in my shift, and I'm trying to place another, 1,300. I don't know if that math adds up, but anyway, you get the point where it's like, what's going on? And that would prompt, hey, I'm not going to make my budget because I'm not going to complete the amount of work I need to. I need to call the material supplier and figure out where my material is. We talked about the on-the-spot approval for payment, that proof of delivery, that benefits everyone. And then, ultimately, eliminating the manual key punching. That's a basic, I would say, of Build It. That's kind of one of the main, or not main, but one of the basic selling points is, hey, if you use this tool, you're going to receive this information electronically rather than have to sit down and key punch. And that key punching accounts for a lot of time. You think about some of these jobs. I mentioned Northgate Constructors on the DFW connector. There was 300 million plus of materials being brought onto that job site. So those are dollars that need to be managed. And quite frankly, if you're going to do it correctly, you got to enter all that in. So that's a lot of information to punch into a system. So huge time savings from that standpoint.
Yeah, not only labor savings and time savings, right? And then you want your people to working on productive stuff to keep the project on schedule and under budget and so forth. But it's also from a data standpoint. We all know that when you key in things, the opportunity to introduce data errors, increases significantly, and then that can hold up. That can create its own set of problems. With schedules and so forth. What about the other, stakeholders, in the ecosystem? I mean, you talk about bulk material suppliers, ready mix producers, and haulers. I mean, what are some of the benefits for them?
So some of them are the same. I mean, obviously the real time, you find a commonality between this entire conversation. It is communication, increasing the level of communication so that real-time acceptance and notifications are visible for the suppliers and haulers as well. Like I said earlier, instead of managing all the data that they're sending over there, if somebody rejects a load, let's focus on that one and figure that out and move on with our day. I've mentioned the ordering forms. Quite often, in my experience, I ran into a lot of suppliers, big time suppliers, national companies, international companies that were fearful of moving away from the telephone. And that it's completely understandable, because there's a lot that can get lost in email. But if you work on a system and agree to a system that accounts for all the information on the upfront, that makes things much more efficient. And in those cases where company or suppliers and producers were hesitant, by the end of the job, they were actually hesitant to go back to phones, because the communication and the level of documentation was so great that there was never any questions. So that's a benefit. Creating that baseline is something that is done automatically through Build It. So when I say baseline, everyone, their books are based on this, and any updates or edits or anything like that can be done, but you're all starting from that same point and then, coming together with any exceptions. So those are, 3 high level benefits, and there's more, but those are probably some of the significant ones.
Yeah, and I would think that, I think you hit on a point there. I just like in any industry and any kind of, technology implementation or evolution, change management is arguably the biggest hurdle that you face, right? Because everyone's used to the way we've always done things. They've even though they may feel like it's a well-oiled machine, they don't see the inefficiencies that are in place. But the point that you made, I think, is universal, is that once you get over that change management hurdle and you start using some of these newer technologies and you start really experiencing the efficiency and the benefits, if you tell those people, we're going to take the tool away now, we're going to go back to the old way of doing things, universally they all they'll probably rip your head off if you try to get them to go back to the old ways of doing things. But it's just getting over that initial hump that's usually the hardest part, because once you start really seeing the power and the benefits of this, it's really hard to go back.
Well, and it's an excellent point, that we could have talked about during the challenges portion of our discussion. One of the challenges with this system is, if it's not completed or if it's not done correctly, work continues. Invoices still show up. If you're not catching a mistake, checks are still being written, and that process isn't going to go away, and the work is going to continue. And that's one of the challenges when you speak to change management, is oftentimes collecting the data and putting it into a form that you can summarize and look at the data as a whole. That's being done on Saturdays and Sundays and after work hours. So you talk about the inconsistencies. These people are tired. They just got done with a long week, and now they have this stack of tickets in front of them. There's going to be mistakes made. And the easy button is just to say, well, I'll just wait for an invoice, and when it comes, I'll just pay the check. That's not the correct easy button. The true easy button is having that type of efficiency to wait for the invoice and write the check, but have the backup and the verification behind it easily accessible to make sure that those are accurate.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love the easy button analogy there. Well, Kyle, we're running short on time here, so I'm just going to go right to my last question here. As a way to wrap up, if you look out, let's say 3 to 5 years now, what capabilities or attributes will separate the leaders from the laggers in this industry? In other words, what will define success in the heavy building materials and for building contractors moving forward?
Yeah. Well, I would say, I think this topic is definitely the next necessary advancement. We've seen a lot, just in the last 10 years, between survey equipment, scheduling methods. There's been a lot of work with BIM modeling and some of the benefits of that throughout the course of the job and beyond. Tools, you see the tablets and the work plan, schematic drawings, all this stuff is advancing. But at the end of the day, managing the money is probably the next step to become quite more efficient. If we don't do that, we're simply not going to be able to make our budgets and our schedules. The industry already has a problem with this. I think I saw some statistics on how many jobs actually finish on time and under budget without change orders and things that are costly and time consuming. And it's a pretty small number. And in order to keep moving the ball forward, we need to be able to manage the money more efficiently. So I think this is the next step. If you're in 3 to 5 years, if you are still cutting checks manually, I'd say you're a definite lagger, and you need to update your systems, because it's clear across the board from small jobs to big jobs. If you need to spend the time to make sure you're writing the right check amount, you're wasting time, because there's more valuable things you need to be doing. But like I said, you need to have that verification there, and that's the next step, is really producing something that allows for that.
Right. And I think if you're 3 to 5 years from now, if you're facing a stack of paper tickets on a big desk that you have to manually put in, I would think that's another clear sign, probably, that you're probably getting left behind, right?
You need to be working. Yeah, you need to be off paper in 5 years, I would say, and that's not just paper copy tickets. That's quality assurance, quality control. We talked earlier, all of the data that goes into these materials that they're producing to build work with. That's still all paper as well. So moving that information from party to party where necessary is going to be the next big thing, I think.
Great. Well, Kyle, we, like I always say at the end of all our episodes, we always just manage to scratch the surface on these topics that, we probably could have spent, a whole conference, right? A whole day conference, just talking about the opportunities and that are ahead for this industry. But, again, thank you for making the time to share your insights and advice on this topic.
Absolutely. I was happy to be a part of it, and you're exactly right. That was the biggest challenge of today, is just trying to fit everything in. So I very much enjoyed being here, and thank you for having me on.
Great. I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Command Alkon website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Kyle, you can post it there. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you all, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.